The night I finally did it, the house was completely quiet. It was a Tuesday, just past 11. I remember because the late news had already gone off, and I was sitting at the kitchen table in my robe with a cup of chamomile tea I hadn't touched. My reading glasses were perched on the end of my nose. In front of me was my laptop, a yellow legal pad covered in my own handwriting, and 63 years of a life I had built with my own 2 hands. I stared at the screen for a long time before I moved the cursor. Then I clicked confirm, and just like that, it was done. I want to tell you how I got there, because it didn't happen overnight, even though in my mind it feels like it did. The truth is, it had been building for years, quietly, the way water finds its way into the foundation of a house. You don't see the damage until one morning you press your foot to the floor and feel it give. My husband Leonard, I still catch myself calling him that, 31 years of marriage, doesn't just leave, passed away in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer, from diagnosis to funeral, was 4 months and 11 days. I know because I counted. Counting was the only thing that made sense during that time, the only way I could put one foot in front of the other. 4 months and 11 days, and then it was just me. We had one daughter. Her name is Monica. She was 42 when her father died, and she cried beautifully at the service, the kind of crying that makes other people cry too. Half the congregation was weeping just watching her. I held her hand during the burial and thought, at least we have each other. I should have paid closer attention to what happened next. Monica and her husband, I'll call him my son-in-law, because that's all he ever really was to me, never a son, moved back to our town about 6 months after Leonard passed. They said it was because they wanted to be closer to me. Monica said she worried about me being alone in the house. She said the drive from Columbus was getting to be too much whenever I needed something. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. What mother wouldn't? They didn't move in with me. They rented a house about 12 minutes away, a 3-bedroom with a finished basement on a street with young maple trees. I thought it was a nice gesture, them choosing to be close. I thought this was love rearranging itself around loss. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that they had been having financial trouble for the better part of 2 years before Leonard died. My son-in-law had left his job at an engineering firm under circumstances he described to me as a mutual decision. Monica had cut back her hours at the dental office where she worked as an office manager to take care of things at home. What things exactly, I was never quite sure, but they never asked me for money directly. That's the part I need you to understand. They never sat down at my table and said, "Mom, we need help." It was never that honest. It was always something smaller, something that didn't feel like a request at all. It started with the car. Monica's car needed a new transmission, and she mentioned it at dinner. Not to me, not really, just sort of into the air above the table, the way she'd done since she was a teenager when she wanted something and didn't want to look like she was asking for it. I said, "Take it to Ray's on Maple, he's fair." She said she wasn't sure they had the money right now. I said I'd take care of it. I don't even remember making a decision. It was just what you did, $2,200. Then it was their health insurance gap, while my son-in-law was between jobs. I added them both to my supplemental plan through Leonard's retirement benefits, which had carried over to me as a survivor. I didn't think twice. They were family. Then it was my granddaughter's preschool tuition, because the district they'd chosen had a 2-year wait list for public pre-K. Then it was a plumbing emergency at their rental. Then a car for my son-in-law, because Monica needed hers for work, and they couldn't share. Then groceries, casually, when they came to dinner and I sent them home with bags. Then the cable bill, because Monica mentioned offhand that they'd had to turn it off. Then their gym membership, because my son-in-law said he was trying to get healthy and they couldn't swing it right now. I want to be clear, I have money. Leonard and I were not extravagant people, but we were careful. We saved. He had a pension from 30 years in civil engineering, and I taught high school English for 28 years before I retired. We paid off the house in 2004. We made sensible investments. When Leonard died, I was not a wealthy woman by any grand definition, but I was, and I want you to hear this, comfortable. I had worked for comfortable. I had earned it. And so when my daughter needed things, I gave them. Because I could. Because she was my child. Because Leonard would have done the same. What I didn't do was keep track. That was my mistake. Not the giving, the not watching. It was my niece who finally said something. She's the daughter of my late sister, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 30s who works in financial planning down in Nashville. She came to visit me last Easter, drove up by herself, brought a honey ham and a pecan pie, and we sat on the porch after dinner and she asked me gently how I was doing, financially. I told her I was fine. She nodded slowly, the way she does when she's deciding whether to push. Then she said, Aunt Bev, she's called me Aunt Bev my whole life. My name is Beverly. She said, when's the last time you looked at your monthly outflow? Really looked? I didn't have a good answer. After she left, I sat down with 3 months of bank statements and a highlighter. I'm not going to tell you it was a shock, because I think somewhere underneath everything I already knew. But seeing the numbers written out, seeing the pattern of it, seeing what had become unexamined, that was something else. I counted 87 recurring transactions that traced back to Monica and my son-in-law's life. 87. Their car insurance, their daughter's school, a streaming service I'd added for them and forgotten about, a meal kit delivery I'd signed up for because Monica said she was trying to cook more. A storage unit, I didn't even know they had a storage unit, subscription boxes. Their cell phone plan because my son-in-law had temporarily moved them onto my family plan 3 years ago and it never moved back. 87 payments, some monthly, some annual, adding up to nearly $2,000 a month, every month, for going on 4 years. I sat with that number for a long time. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this is what families do. I told myself Monica would do the same for me if I needed it. But I knew even then that last part wasn't quite true. The dinner happened in September. Monica and my son-in-law had hosted a small gathering at their house, her birthday 53, and they'd invited a handful of people I knew. 2 couples from their neighborhood, my son-in-law's mother, his brother who's a contractor. I arrived with flowers and a card. I was happy to be there. I love my daughter, and I hadn't seen most of these people since before the pandemic. Dinner was lovely. Monica is a good cook when she bothers, and she'd made a beautiful table. Afterward, we were all in the living room, and one of the neighbors, a younger woman, maybe early 40s, very put together, asked me what I was up to these days. I told her I'd been doing some traveling, a river cruise in Portugal the previous spring, and that I was thinking about another trip abroad next fall. I said I was looking into Ireland because Leonard's family had roots there and I'd always wanted to go. There was a silence I didn't understand right away. Later, after the other guests had gone and it was just me and Monica and my son-in-law cleaning up the kitchen, he said it. He was drying a pot, not looking at me, and he said it almost casually. The way he said most things, as though it were barely worth mentioning, as though it were just a passing thought. He said, I do sometimes wonder if it's the best use of money, all that traveling, when things are tight for a lot of people. I stopped what I was doing. Monica was loading the dishwasher. She didn't look up. He said, I just mean, it might be worth thinking about, living a little more modestly. A lot of people your age do. It's practical. I said, I'm sorry? He set the pot down. He shrugged. The particular shrug he had that meant he was done with a conversation he'd technically just started. I'm not trying to start anything. Just saying it's something to consider. Monica finally looked at me. She had an expression on her face that I'd seen before. Not quite agreement, not quite apology. Somewhere between them. The expression of someone who knows a thing is wrong but has decided not to say so. I put down the dish towel I was holding. I said goodnight. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for a while before I went inside. I want to tell you what that ride home felt like because I've tried to explain it to people and I don't always find the right words. It wasn't anger, exactly, or not only anger. It was something quieter and more clarifying. It was the feeling of something that had been blurry, finally coming into focus. I thought about the 87 payments. I thought about the transmission, and the insurance gap, and the storage unit I hadn't known about. I thought about my granddaughter's school, and the meal kit service, and the cell phones. I thought. He told me to live more modestly, while I have been paying for his life. I called my niece the next morning. I told her everything. The dinner, what he said, the full number I'd tallied from the statements. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I was done, she said, Aunt Bev, what do you want to do? I said I didn't know. She said, yes, you do. She was right. I did know. I'd known since I was sitting in my car in the driveway, but I hadn't let myself say it yet. I spent the next 3 weeks doing what I should have done quietly, carefully, and without any announcement. I talked to my bank. I talked to the attorney who had handled Leonard's estate, a kind man named Hargrove who'd been practicing in our county for 40 years and had seen, I think, most everything. I made sure I understood every legal implication. I made sure my own finances were entirely in order. And then on a Tuesday just after 11 o'clock, I sat down at the kitchen table with my chamomile tea and my legal pad and I began removing them. One by one, the car insurance, removed. The cell phones, removed with a 60-day notice to the carrier so they'd have time to set up their own plan. The school tuition, I gave a full semester's notice, which was more than was required. The meal kit service, the streaming, the gym, the storage unit, all of it, item by item, account by account. Some were easy, some required phone calls I made during business hours over the following days, always politely, always without explanation. The last thing I did was write a simple letter, not angry, not accusing, just factual. I told Monica that after careful reflection, I would no longer be covering ongoing expenses for her household. I told her I loved her. I told her I was happy to talk if she wanted to talk. I mailed it on a Wednesday, certified return receipt. She called me Friday morning. She was crying before I even said hello. She said she didn't understand. She said, where was this coming from? She said after everything they'd been through, after she'd uprooted their lives to be closer to me, I was doing this now. I let her finish. Then I said, Monica, do you know how much money I've given your household over the last 4 years? Silence. I told her the number, not the 87 payments, the total dollar amount. I'd had Hargrove's office help me calculate it properly. More silence. She said, we didn't ask you to. I said, I know. You never asked. That's part of what I've been thinking about. My son-in-law called that same afternoon. He was not crying. He was something else entirely. Clipped, precise, the voice he used when he was trying to sound reasonable while being unreasonable. He said this was impulsive. He said I was acting out of emotion. He said there were better ways to handle whatever concerns I had. I said I handled it the way I chose to handle it. He said some other things. I listened to them. Then I said, I need to go now, and I ended the call. They came to the house on Saturday. Both of them, together, which I hadn't expected. I'd thought if anyone came, it would be Monica alone. I saw them pull into the driveway from the kitchen window. I watched them walk up the front path. I opened the door before they knocked. I don't know exactly what they had planned to say. It didn't much matter. I stood in the doorway. I didn't open the storm door, just the main door, enough to speak clearly, and I said hello. I said I'd gotten Monica's messages and I'd received the voicemails. I said I understood they were upset. My son-in-law started talking about responsibility, about family, about what kind of mother cuts off her own daughter. I let him talk. When he stopped, I said, I haven't cut off my daughter. I've stopped paying for your household. Those are different things. Monica said, Mom, please. I said, I love you. I would like us to have a real relationship. A relationship isn't one person paying for everything and the other person telling that person to live more carefully. My son-in-law's face changed then, just slightly. He knew exactly what I was referring to. They left after a few more minutes. I stood at the window and watched the car back out. Then I went and made myself a proper cup of coffee, the good kind, the whole beans I grind fresh, and I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet, and for the first time in a very long time the quiet felt like mine. My granddaughter is 9 now. Her name is Lily. That's Monica's choice, and a beautiful one, and she calls me Grandma Bev, and when I pick her up from school on the days Monica lets me, she talks the entire drive home about whatever has happened that day. Her teacher, a book she's reading, something funny that happened at lunch. She is without question the great delight of my later years. Monica and I are talking again. It's different than it was, more careful, more honest, in ways that feel uncomfortable sometimes and necessary always. We have had conversations I don't think we could have had before, hard ones, real ones. She told me a few months ago that she'd known things had gotten out of hand but hadn't known how to say it, and that she was sorry. It wasn't a simple apology, and I didn't take it as one. We're still working on it. My son-in-law and I are civil. I don't expect more than that, and I've made my peace with it. My niece came back up in the spring, same as always, honey ham and pecan pie. We sat on the porch and she asked me how I was doing. I told her I was good, genuinely good, not the way you say it when you don't want to explain. She looked at me for a moment and then she smiled and said she could tell. I did eventually book that trip to Ireland. I leave in October. I've already started a notebook. Places to see, family names Leonard once mentioned, a restaurant in Cork that's supposed to be extraordinary. I'll be gone for 12 days. I'll send Monica a postcard. Leonard used to say that the most important thing he ever learned about money was that it doesn't solve problems, it just reveals them. I didn't fully understand that when he said it. I understand it now. I worked for comfortable. I earned it. And somewhere in the grief of losing him, in the need to still feel useful, still feel like a mother, still feel like the center of something, I let comfortable become something I was quietly apologizing for. I'm done apologizing. The chamomile tea that night had gone cold by the time I closed the laptop. I poured it out and went to bed and slept better than I had in years. The house was quiet in that particular way it gets past midnight. No cars on the street, no wind, just the sound of a house breathing. I thought, this is my house, this is my life. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it completely.